provincial chairperson, Comrade Provincial Secretary, Mama Jacob Mamapulo, Comrade Comrade Professor Mandla Radebe, our Provincial Chairperson, leaders and members of our SACP, of the ANC, of COSATU, SANCO, and all comrades and friends that have joined us today. It is a real honor for me to be presenting the third Ruth First Annual Memorial Lecture. And I titled it Ruth First, the Revolutionary Intellectual, the Anti-Imperialist, and then I look at her life and I see what are the tasks for the SACP today. Just hide this. In moments of profound change, certain figures emerge whose lives illuminate both the struggles of their time and the enduring principles that continue to shape the present. One such figure is Comrade Ruth First, whose intellectual rigor, political courage, and commitment to justice remain a source of guidance and inspiration. Her journey reflects not only the turbulent context in which she lived, but also the powerful intersections of thought and action that she embodied. This lecture revisits her legacy, traces the ideas, movements, and values that defined her contribution, while pointing towards the practices that can still inform collective efforts today. The key themes that will be addressed are the international and South African balance of forces, the biography and political formation, Ruth First as a model of theory and Ruth First in relation to the worker participation crisis and the SACP's electoral strategy, the People's Red Caravan and the Freedom Charter, Comrade Ruth First's values and the principles, and we conclude with a call to practice. Oh my. So in order to understand Comrade Ruth First, we have to look at the international and South African balance of forces. Understanding the globe for examining how Ruth First's political biography and formation was shaped. A Marxist-Leninist analysis of the contemporary geopolitical environment reveals a world. The unipolar moment of US hegemony following the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the socialist countries of Eastern Europe is fracturing, giving way to nascent multipolarity. However, this shift occurs within the enduring of monopoly financial capital, which remains a dominant, globalized force, exploiting labor and extracting surplus value on a world scale. The inherent crisis of capitalism, which is overaccumulation, the falling rates of profits, and intensifying class struggle, are manifesting as rampant militarism, environmental degradation, neo-fascist movements as a political weapon of the bourgeoisie against a fragmented working class.
Sorry, Comrade Reneva. Comrade Zimisele, Comrade D, please mute for us. And Comrade D, or maybe help us to mute those who are not failing to mute themselves. Please proceed, Comrade Reneva.
Okay. So in South Africa, this international context is refracted through a specific and paradoxical national reality, as we are witnessing intensified efforts of US interference in our domestic affairs. The 1994 democratic breakthrough was a monumental victory against political apartheid, celebrated at home and abroad. However, from a class perspective, it represented an incomplete revolution. Our historical class enemies, both domestic and internationally, were reluctant to relinquish substantive power. Firstly, while there was a decisive political shift in power, with the expansion of a non-racial vote for all, removal of restrictions on movement, speech, and association, the democratic breakthrough did not result in a transfer of economic power. The economy, the commanding heights of finance, mining, and land remained predominantly controlled by monopoly capital. Secondly, the process of safeguarding bourgeois economic interests began immediately. From 1994 to 1996, the then government of national unity saw the National Party retain control of the finance ministry. And this period was pivotal in the conceptualization and subsequent imposition of gear in 1996, which marked a decisive victory for capital over the developmentalist aspirations of the RDP. Consequently, we witnessed a reciprocal downward spiral, systematically tilting the balance of forces against the working class and its allies. The state, constrained by neoliberal macroeconomic orthodoxy, could not address the needs of the people at the required pace. As the triple crisis of capitalism, poverty, unemployment, and inequality increased, the people's faith in the liberation movement decreased. This decline in electoral support mandate and strengthened the hand of capital, which demanded ever more market-friendly policies, increased outsourcing of public services, and ultimately the privatization of public goods. Furthermore, capital systematically recaptured political power from the local government sphere, targeting it as an autonomous sphere of delivery. Currently, the ANC only controls 45% of local municipalities, which makes coherent service provision across the country very difficult. And this is accelerating the cycle of disillusionment. Now, the internal class struggle within the liberation movement itself was intensified by the changed global and domestic environment. The unbanning of liberation movement organizations in 1990. Wait, sorry, let me just, because she is my friend, let me just alert her that
All
she
right,
needs to
thank you,
mute.
Comrade Reneva.
So, I'll just repeat, the internal class struggles within the liberation movement itself was intensified by the changing global and domestic environment. The unbanning of the liberation movement organizations in 1990, it led to an influx of thousands of new members into the ANC. And without the rigorous vetting and discipline that was enforced by exile and underground conditions, the character of the movement began to change. Many joined to advance careers or business interests. Others were directly influenced by capital, and the dissolution of apartheid-era parties like the National Party and former homelands saw many of their members and ideologies assimilated into the liberation movement. So this altered character explains the systematic decline of the SACP's fundamental influence over ANC policy, even if we gained increased platforms of engagement. So the internal class contradiction also abetted the shift in the state's policies and actions towards the right. Despite this, we have that the resistance by the left, not just from the party, but other forces as members of the ANC, and the movement's historical connections to global networks allowed for occasional centered social policies.
Comrade Reneva, wait. I think there's too many people who are disrupting. Comrade David Philip. Comrade Theo, if you are back on the other device, please mute.
Okay, so as I was saying, despite this, of people-centered social policies emerge, and from our liberation movement and from our government, there is a progressive international stance. So the May 2024 general election must be understood as a key battleground in this ongoing class war. The West, threatened by South Africa's independent foreign policy stance and seeking a pliant regime, invested heavily in opposition parties and media campaigns to unseat the ANC. Amid very real governance and internal challenges, the ANC contended with a well-resourced opposition and a media ecosystem that amplified its failures and disseminated a false narrative of a failed state. Anyone that knows what a failed state is would know that South Africa is nowhere close to a failed state. While the West failed to completely unseat the ANC, reducing its votes to 40% forced the ANC to go into a coalition. The subsequent decision of the ANC to form a government of national unity that included the DA and other right-leaning parties represents a cave-in to counter-revolutionary forces, because the ANC had no credible choice on the left. The SACP's proposal for a minority government was rejected. We are now witnessing accelerated moves towards the privatization of electricity, spectrum, logistics, and water, among others. This has precipitated a deep crisis of legitimacy and a corrosive depoliticization among the masses, who see a vast chasm between the promise of liberation and the reality of their daily immiseration. It is within this dual crisis, comrades, of global capitalist instability and a local balance of forces that's being pushed decisively towards a resurgent bourgeoisie, that the revolutionary legacy of Comrade Ruth First demands reclamation. Her life and work provided a vital compass for a communist movement that is navigating this complex and hostile terrain. Comrade Ruth First was not a salon revolutionary or an armchair academic. She was a cadre of the Communist Party of South Africa, later the South African Communist Party, a journalist, a scholar, and an activist whose entire life was dedicated to the overthrow of born to communist immigrants, Julius and Matilda First, she was immersed in radical politics from childhood. Her father was a founding member of the Communist Party of South Africa, and their home was a hub of political discussion and organization. This upbringing instilled in her a foundational commitment to Marxism-Leninism, to non-racialism, and to the belief that intellectual work must serve the struggle for liberation. Her political formation was shaped by the brutal realities of apartheid. As a journalist for progressive publications like Fighting Talk and The Guardian, or later New Age, she used the intellect as a weapon, conducting meticulous investigative work to expose the brutal mechanics of the regime, the forced labor system, the inhumanity of past laws, and the ruthless exploitation in mines and on farms. Her personal and political development laid the foundation for her ability to consistently bridge theory and practice, as outlined earlier in the introductions of the chair and as of the secretary. So if we look at Comrade Ruth First as a model of theory and practice, there are some that she espoused. The first is humility and organic intellectualism. Despite her formidable academic prowess, Comrade First's work was characterized by a deep respect for the lived experiences of the oppressed. She did not descend upon the masses as an expert from on high. Her methodology involved listening to and learning from workers, peasants, and grassroots communities. She understood, in a truly Gramscian sense, that every human being is an intellectual and that the factory floor, the village, and the township are sites of crucial knowledge production. Her feminism was rooted in listening to and documenting specific triple exploitation of black women, recognizing that race, class, and gender oppression were fused into a single experience. With regards to the value of a woman in intellectualism, Comrade Ruth First's presence shattered the patriarchal notion that revolutionary theory and leadership are masculine domains. She operated at the highest level of ideological and strategic discussion, commanding respect through the force of her intellect and the courage of her convictions. She demonstrated that the revolutionary woman intellectual is not a contradiction, but a necessity, bringing a critical perspective that enriches and completes Marx ensuring the struggle against patriarchy is central to the fight for socialism. Comrade First's commitment to praxis is reflected in her interventions during moments of crisis, particularly in debates on worker participation and the strategic orientation of the SACP. The question of electoral participation illuminates a synergy between the historical context of communist activism and the contemporary decisions of the SACP. Research confirms that Comrade First's parents were stalwarts of the Communist Party of South Africa, which before being suppressed or banned, did contest in elections in the 1940s with a clear revolutionary socialist agenda aimed at using the parliamentary platform to confront the system rather than to manage it. For the Communist Party of South Africa of that era and the underground SACP that Comrade Ruth First belonged to, participation in bourgeois institutions was a tactical question, subordinate to the strategic goal of building independent working class power for socialist revolution. This is in line with the SACP's current decision to contest elections independently while remaining within the alliance. Since 1994, the party had subordinated its independent program to the electoral fortunes of the ANC within the alliance. However, this led to a profound crisis of working class representation. The working class votes for the ANC, but is possessing diminishing actual power over the state and the economy. Because we as the SACP have been unable to halt the government's trajectory towards neoliberalism. Comrade First's praxis offers a searing critique of this predicament. Her life was dedicated to building independent working class organizations and consciousness. Her works, like Black Gold, Mozambican Miner, Proletarian and Peasant, analyzed the concrete conditions of the working class to inform revolutionary strategy. Her legacy calls for a reassertion of independent communist politics using elections as a way of struggle among many to build the hegemonic power of the working class and the poor. These struggles connect directly to a broader mass movement or directly to broader mass movements such as the adoption of the Freedom Charter. These struggles connect directly to broader mass movement campaigns such as the adoption of the Freedom Charter and the People's Red Caravan, which embody collective aspirations for liberation. Comrade Ruth First was deeply involved in the processes that led to the 1955 Freedom Charter. Her Marxist-Leninist analysis would have seen it as the most advanced platform for national democratic struggle, a revolutionary stage to rally the masses, to defeat apartheid, and to create conditions favorable to advance socialism. The Charter's opening line, "South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white," is a perfect expression of the non-racial communism that she championed. As we mark 70 years since the adoption of the Freedom Charter, Comrade First's legacy forces a critical reading of the Charter's fate today. A Ruth First-inspired analysis would demand reclaiming the Freedom Charter as a radical tool for mobilization and critique. It would use the Charter's unfulfilled promises to expose the neoliberal neocolonial character of the current governance trajectory and to argue that its true realization is impossible within capitalism. The Charter is a living testament to the unfinished revolution, a revolution that, as Comrade First understood, must be deepened in a struggle for socialism. The national dialogue, the current one, offers an opportunity for people-centered engagement. While reactionary forces would like to hijack it for nefarious reasons, it is incumbent on us to ensure that the platform is shaped in such a manner that its content exceeds that of the Charter in championing the interests of the workers and the poor. Similarly, the SACP involving party lead struggles represents a conscious attempt to reconnect with the masses. The link to Ruth First's life and values here are potent. The Red Caravan echoes her methodological commitment to listening and to learning from the ground up, representing a top-down party culture. Her Comrade First's legacy provides a critical framework to ensure goes beyond symbolism. For Comrade First, engage periodic listening tour intervention. It was a continuous month. The challenge for the Red Caravan is to maintain sustainability in areas where it operates. Purpose is not just to explain party, but to fundamentally reshape based on what is learnt from the organic intellectuals in communities and workplaces for building independent working class power, which goes beyond canvassing for votes. Grassroots-driven campaigns and principles that guided both the First and the liberation movement as a whole. Her core values and principles, which many have touched on, Comrade Ruth's first life was principles remain as relevant today as they were during her lifetime. We have the principle for Comrade Ruth First, non-Marxism, were not liberal add-ons, but foundational communist principles. She fought for a workers' movement that united across the color line, crafted by capital to divide and rule. She understood that a socialism that did not actively dismantle patriarchy and white supremacy would merely reproduce these oppressions in a new form. Also espoused intellectual rigor and tolerance. Comrade First understood she stood for a culture of fierce but comradely debate, of critical inquiry, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge as essential tools for liberation. The ability to engage challenging within the organization and without resorting to dismissiveness or character assassination. So I also apply this to myself. Understanding that rigorous theory is forged through contestation. She modeled the principle that party intellectuals serves the movement, learning from the masses and placing her skills at their disposal. That's why she had embraced the values of humility and service. Comrade Ruth, the cause of socialism, a reminder that the struggle requires the highest level of dedication and discipline, unity, and democratic centralism. Comrade First opined Vanguard Party, where internal organizational discipline was a matter of life, and in this principle of democratic centralism, which allowed for full and free debate on policy and strategy, followed by a united communication and implementation mentally underlined in groupings, which destroy trust and it fractures the organization into competing cliques. In party structures, of raising critiques, the practice of raising critiques within party structures and providing and not through divisive maneuvering. That organizational unity is the bedrock of revolutionary strength, enabling decisively against a very powerful, very organized, opponent. So, grounding the discussion in these principles allows us to conclude the continuation of Comrade Ruth's legacy in present life was a testament the utmost humility before the power of the organized in a crisis and a deviation from this legacy is an urgent action. should DP and the broader left to to a renewed drive to practice, to recommit theory is tested and refined in the fires of mass struggle, to put intellectualism as the ultimate source, socialism and non-sexism, to use instruments like the People's Red Caravan to genuinely listen and build power from below, to reclaim the Freedom Charter from co-option and to assert its radical unfinished demands using the national dialogue as a vehicle, to reassert revolutionary organizational discipline. The current conditions underscore the vital importance of democratic centralism and organizational unity. The strength to navigate the current complex terrain will be found in standing or factional loyalty, but in the collective will and action that flows from our unity, our theory, our unwavering commitment to the revolutionary cause. This trinity of strength is our indispensable armory. Our unity is our fundamental strategic weapon. It is the discipline and active unity of a vanguard that understands its historical mission. It is the antithesis of the divide and rule capable of countering the organized power against the only force that is capable of countering the organized power of capital. It means speaking with one voice to the masses and acting as a single fist against the enemy, transforming the party from a talk shop into a formidable instrument of class struggle. Our theory is our compass and our map. It is the scientific socialism of Marx, Engels, and Lenin, applied concretely to the South African reality as Comrade First did. This, and having a strong base in theory, protects us from the paralysis of empiricism and the opportunism. It allows us to see beyond the immediate crises to the underlying structures of exploitation, to anticipate the moves of our class enemies, and to devise a strategy that is not a reaction to events, but a conscious shaping of history. Our unwavering, our unwavering commitment to the revolutionary cause is the fuel that drives the entire engine. It is the moral and political conviction that the struggle for socialism is not a career path, but a lifelong. To commemorate Comrade Ruth First, to do more than to remember a hero. It is to ignite an uncompromising flame of critical, humble, disciplined, and militant communist praxis, the only force capable of answering the deep crises of our time and leading the way to a truly free South Africa. Her legacy demands that we wield to the weapon of unity, guided by the compass of theory and propelled by an unshakable commitment to see the revolutionary cause through to its final conclusion. Honoring Comrade Ruth First is to refuse surrender and to carry forward the struggle for freedom, to carry forward the struggle until freedom is not a promise, but a lived reality for all. I thank you, comrades.
Thank you very much, Comrade Reneva, for that powerful intervention that we have made on behalf of the Central Committee. as we remember and commemorate the life of Comrade Est. As the province lecture in our endeavor and commitment to remember and be inspired by those that have come before us. Many of 6 theses to us are quite important in a reflection of a call to action for us. I mean, amongst the other things you have reminded of the intellectual rigor of Comrade Ruth First as a Marxist-Leninist theorist who always applied her theory in the concrete and dialectical condition of both the balance of forces domestically and internationally. I think that's one of the very important message that but on the international front in particular, I think you've spoken at length and about the lessons that we should draw from the life of Comrade Ruth First, and they should not be understood in isolation in her fight against imperialism, against apartheid South Africa in the context of the liberation struggle. That is very important. And I think that is why, comrades, when we think about the death of Comrade Ruth First as a calculated act, in my view, it was a calculated act of desperate bourgeois regime that had to come to reality with the fact that its overthrow was inevitable. In honor of Comrade Ruth First, we must go beyond just the overthrow of the apartheid regime, that class-conscious force that will help us to build socialism. So thank you very much, Comrade Reneva, for those interventions. Highly appreciated. Comrades, we are now going to do what the PS had asked us to do, to reflect and engage with the lecture on behalf of, as presented by Comrade Reneva. We are going to take hands. And I think that how I do things is that I do not take hands that are triggered by other inputs. So I see Comrade Lifiga's hand is up, but can we note other hands so that we can take a first round and allow comrades to engage. If you can't raise your hand, you can just shout. We will also note your hands. But I think I don't see any other hands. Comrade Lifiga, let's give you the opportunity to engage, and then we'll see if there are other hands.
No, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, comrades. First off, I must thank Comrade Reneva for presenting this long overdue lecture, and I think that it was very well presented. You know, myself, I have always been in awe of the intellectual prowess of Comrade Ruth and Comrade. So I think the call within the Communist Party post 1994 to establish our own academic intelligentsia on, I think, leaders such as Comrade Ruth. But that is my question. Comrade Reneva, I think there's so many strands that Comrade Ruth has imparted through her leadership and her contributions to our struggle, our party, the movement at large. But is there a way for us to see how or get very specific names of a network of women, South African women in particular, that Comrade Ruth worked with in terms of her many agendas. Because for me, I think a key issue of how Comrade Ruth and other South African leaders worked to push back these frontiers of patriarchy still, rears its head within the party, within society, within the movement. And it's important for us to be able to illustrate to comrades today how comrades worked collectively as a net to push back these frontiers, transform issues around patriarchy and how we contribute within the party. That is my question, Comrade Reneva. If not today, but maybe at some point for us to have more of an understanding, because we know Comrade Ruth did not work alone, and so would help for us to also endeavor. Thank you.
Let me also appreciate the well-presented lecture by Dr. Reneva, our Central Committee member. The first thing is that I just want to check with Doctor that can the lecture be shared? That would be the first thing. The second part is that indeed, as women who joined the South African Communist Party, we appreciate Ruth First that she pushed back the three challenges that we are facing today. But my question to Dr. Reneva is that in your own presentation, you have indicated that many joined movement to advance their interest. Some has joined to advance their business. Some are used by capital to unseat and to destroy the ANC in particular. Just want to find out from you, Doctor, as the left, have you lost the battle to fight imperialists, to fight this current? Thank you very much, Chair. I'll await the doctor to respond to the question. Thanks, Chair.
Comrade Lambert. So I don't see any other hands. So before I come back to you, Comrade Reneva, if you could just reflect, and I don't want to pose this as a question, but as a comment for us to reflect collectively on these issues. I mean, part of the history of Comrade Ruth First. Of course, we know that her activism within the Communist Party is owed largely to her parents, who were migrants in South Africa and were members of the Communist Party. And that is why, as a young person growing up in Kensington and in GP Girls in particular, she was quite vocal because she would accompany her parents to Communist Party meetings. But what then becomes of Ruth First as a young lady, when she gets to Wits, she becomes quite active. She worked with a number of prominent leaders in the Congress movements, the likes of Nelson Mandela, and I think it is during that time that she meets Joe Slovo. Even when she finished her studies at the university as a young worker in Johannesburg municipality, she becomes very vocal and active. Actually, that's the reason she leaves. And when she, even as a journalist, she demonstrates a commitment to the, to the resolution of the national question in South Africa. I mean, if you look at the work, her expose of the conditions in Bethal, potato farms, for example, is a demonstration of not just any form of journalism, but a form of journalism that is an activism. Even as a scholar, if you read her writings, you can see that it's an activist scholar. So the question that I think perhaps Comrade Reneva should, what has happened to the caliber of such young, feisty people that, especially from groups, particularly the whites, the Indians and the so-called coloreds, because I mean, historically, they have always been there, very feisty, very, committed. But when you go to the movement today, whether you are in the ANC, in COSATU, or the SACP, all you find is like you're in a meeting of the Pan-Africanist Congress, it's just Africans only. What has happened to that generation, to that tradition, and what is it that could be done to reverse that so that we, as we resolve and begin to engage with the need to resolve the national question in South Africa, it is on the basis of the non-racial united South Africa that is as espoused in the Freedom Charter. So let me come back to you, Comrade Reneva, since I don't see any other hands.
Thank you, Comrade Mandla, also for the rich background that you shared. To come to Comrade Lafika's question, I think she's right. You're right, Comrade Lafika, that we need to research more. Comrade Ruth did participate in FETSO, the Federation of South African Women, and right now we do have the Progressive Women's Movement that entails a wide range of what we would call mass democratic formation entities that looks at fighting patriarchy, which is led by the Alliance, and in particularly the ANC Women's League and also the ANC Gender Commission. But somehow the voice of the progressive women's movement can be amplified significantly more. And definitely it is something that we as the SACP Gender and Social Transformation Commission should be exploring further. And then with regards to Comrade Lama's point of have we lost the battle, currently the balance of forces are tilted significantly against us. If we're seeing the kinds of interventions that the US is making, and they're moving fast now to try and impose or to try and influence particularly our foreign policy trajectory and our stance on or our support for the situation in Palestine. And they are leveraging the frustrations, whether legitimate or not, that is being expressed by the Afrikaner community to undermine our sovereignty. But in addition, if we just look, I don't remember the report now. I'm sure other people on the platform can assist me here. But if we look at the funding for the DA in the past 2 months only, and Action SA, but the DA in particular, I think it's something like 35 million rand. So as we go towards the local government elections, we can see that the funding towards opposition to the movement is increasing significantly, and we'll probably see them trying to influence think tanks and the media as we get closer to the elections, reinforce the perception that as a liberation movement we are incapable of governing. and that only they can do that. I don't think our people will be convinced by their message. However, our people, the message and the consistent reinforcement that we are incapable, and that we are incapable and that we are corrupt, and then highlighting the few incidences of corruption and making it a national phenomenon, whereas the good work that is being achieved is completely underplayed. So it's creating increasing disillusionment among our people. And instead, they might decide even more now not to vote. We're seeing less and less people coming out to vote. And that is likely to increase as we go towards LGE 2026. Now, whether it's a last battle or not is up to us. You know, at the Central Committee meeting over the last weekend, there was a discussion on why it is imperative that we display absolute maturity between now and December 2026 at all levels within the alliance, and that we enter the elections in a very coordinated manner. So there needs to be discussion within the alliance as to how we're going to draw on the strengths of each alliance partner to maximize our impact in local government elections 2026. If we don't do that, and we again get under 50% or less, I think the projection now is around 30%, which we definitely cannot allow to happen. Our chances of being able to influence the general election is going to decrease significantly, because local government influences how people perceives government efficiency. And if we don't control a number of wards or municipalities, our ability to improve the conditions of our people is going to weaken even further, and that is going to reduce our chance towards the next general election. So hence I outlined those qualities of Comrade Ruth First. Because if we are not going to embrace and embed those qualities, then indeed it's going to be a lost battle. Whether it's a lost battle or not, Comrade Lama, is dependent on us. Then as Comrade Che has raised, the fact of what happened to the non-racial or the young, dynamic women across apartheid classified racial divisions, why are they not that prominent today? So maybe it's because I'm in the Western Cape, so I attend a lot of activities that is being arranged by young people. Sadly, this is young people outside of the movement. I went to a lecture at UCT. This one, however, was arranged by SASCO. And I saw so many dynamic young people there. But as Comrade Mandla indicated, it was not as diverse as I would have liked. But then I went to a couple of events that were all commemorating Ruth First, actually. Ruth First, Dalsie September, Dora Tamana. And there were these extremely radical, extremely left-leaning young people that found themselves outside of any political party. And as Comrade Mandla was saying, these young people are there. You know, if we go to societies, this group called themselves the African Youth Formation, but they're not affiliated to any political party. But they're Pan-African, they're socialist, they're non-racial, they're non-sexist. There were these dynamic women, young women under the age of 30, really showing amazing leadership skills. And I'm not talking about the small group of 15 or 20. It was like about 100 people in this room. And I was wondering the same question that Comrade Mandla is raising. Why are we not able to appeal to these young people? And I had a discussion with one of the young women at WITS, And I was asking her, why does she not participate in structures like the YCL? And she was saying it's because we're too arrogant. So maybe it's something that, and we're threatened by people, new people entering the organization that want to assert themselves and bring in new energy and new ideas that stretches beyond our orthodox thinking. And this is what some young people are raising, that we're too arrogant and that we feel threatened by them, and so we suppress them. And maybe it is something that we should reflect on. And maybe it's also something that the YCL should explore. They should engage these formations and find out from them why it is that they don't want to belong to us. Thank you, Comrade Mandla.
Thank you very much, Comrade Reneva, for those responses. You see, there are only two hands in the second round, and comrades note that after this round, I may close. So, Comrade Idumeleng Sikhalo will start with you, and then there's a comrade from Sam Sidu sub-district. I don't know whether that's in Sam Sidu is a sub-district, and Comrade Bonga will be number 3. These are the only hands I can see, comrades. Comrade Idumeleng, go for it.
Comrade Chair, thank you very much. Greetings, comrades. My name is Itumeleng Sikhalo. I'm the District Secretary of the SACP Kalabotsabi District in the Free State. Firstly, let me welcome the input by Comrade Reneva. I was trying to request on the chat board there that the input be distributed, so my gadget misbehaved, so I messed up there. My apology. I was wondering, drawing from the teachings of Comrade Ruth, as presented by Comrade Reneva, I was wondering how can we relate her teachings to one of the issues we have now in South Africa, which is the problem of immigration, and I have here the issue now. I know the position of the party, but one thing we can't deny is that it's an issue amongst our people. Despite the position of the party, this is a very, very serious issue amongst our people. And as Comrade Reneva has said, in the alliance, we should also try to discuss how we maximize our impact with the coming local government elections. This issue is now emerging as one other issue that might also have might also influence thinking amongst larger sections of our people. It's a fact. Let me pass that one. Second issue is the issue of the cultural revolution. I am not sure whether the democratic forces in South Africa we get adequately dealt with the question or the issue of a need, to change attitudes of people. I have in mind things like corruption, looting of the public, the problem we face now of young people who perish in front of our eyes due to drug abuse. The whole thing, the whole story about drugs, we see how it has infected larger, how it impacts on larger sections of our young people who are now just perishing in front of our eyes. I'm not sure if we have done enough as the revolutionary forces in South Africa, from the ANC, SACP, COSATU, and all the mass democratic movement forces, especially on the issue of drug abuse, problem. So I I remember that in 1949, if I'm not mistaken, if we refer to the culture, to the Chinese, to the revolution in China, I'm not sure if it was 1949. You'll correct me about the year, but I know that the Communist Party, there under the leadership of Comrade Chairman Mao, led a cultural revolution there, and that cultural revolution impacted a lot in changing attitudes of society. And the changing of attitudes of society was so much important in advancing the revolution. You know, people started to respect public property. People were beginning to engage to engage to uphold values which supported the aims and objectives of the revolution. I know that in South Africa here some time ago, I'm not sure if it was around 2008, something called moral regeneration was launched, but I'm not sure if it was a project enough, or it was a program enough to be able to contribute meaningfully to the changing of attitudes of society. So perhaps you also need a cultural revolution in South Africa. So I'm wondering if we draw from the teachings of Comrade Ruth First, how would her teachings relate to the need for a cultural revolution? Another point, I'm not sure if this point was raised by one of the earlier speakers at the opening of the political session, of the discussion today, of the inputs today, or it was mentioned by Comrade Reneva, but I remember that somebody mentioned it, that no, the adoption of GIE somehow signaled the defeat of the RGP program. Yes, I agree. But I would even go further that actually the defeat of the revolutionary forces was started with the demise of the Soviet Union. If comrades can recall, I won't say it's a collapse. And I know that international and general people refer to it as a collapse of the Soviet Union, but I would like to refer to it as the destruction, the demand of Soviet Union, because I believe it was not because of the system itself. Well, the system had weaknesses, but also pressure from outside. Imperialist counter-revolution, also the Cold War, also impacted on the system. But that whole a period of the demise of the Soviet Union, the collapse, the so-called collapse of the Soviet Union, had a very profound impact on the strategic orientation of the revolutionary forces in South Africa, including the party. By the way, if we can refer back to history, remember that the party lost close to half, in fact, more than half, if I'm not mistaken, of its Central Committee, which was elected a year earlier in Cuba. Now, if it impacted the party that way, imagine forces like the ANC, which are not officially socialist organizations, as the ANC likes to, refer to itself, or as key leaders of the ANC like to refer to the ANC. I'm saying this in quote. It's not me who are saying this. I'm just referring to what they say. So imagine the impact amongst forces like those. So it had a very, very serious, profound impact. And it was made worse by the adoption of GIE. Lastly, Comrade Chair, we'll be going to local government elections, yes. And the party will be contesting independently, yes. But drawing from the lessons of Comrade Ruth First, how can I put it? I'm trying to check, how do we relate the lessons we draw from Comrade First to the fact that we are a socialist party and we'll also be going into local government elections. I'm trying to talk about how do you approach socialism at the local level, at the municipal level? one comrade I asked one comrade this question. He said to me, no. Yeah, socialism can best be applied nationally. At a local level is something else. I'm not saying we are jumping the NDR. We are trying to refine the socialist version of the NDR as the South African Communist Party. But my point is, what is our attitude to the whole question of socialism? How do we see the building blocks thereof unfolding at a local level, municipal level? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Comrade Tumeleng, comrade from Sam Sidu Sub-District.
Ngibonge ithuba. Igama lami uGenda Xaba. Okwami kuzoba kufishane engizokusho. Ngiqale ngibonge ne-lecture siphiwe umama lapha na, umama uFourie. I-issue engiza nayo mina eye-Red Caravan celebrate usuku luka mama Ruth First. On a Red Caravan, yes, we see the YCL and a men dominated. I don't know, it's because of physical work that are being done in a Red Caravan, but the women are very few that are coming up front to do or to rally behind the banner of the Red Caravan. I submit.
Thank you very much, Comrade Genda. Comrade Nkostetile.
Thank you so much, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. The presentation presented by Comrade Reneva, well prepared, sharp, eloquent. Thank you so much for that. My first question will be in twofold in relation to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, the first fold, I want to find out from the keynote addresser, in your view, did the Soviet Union collapse, or was it collapsed? I'm asking this because there are people who attribute the collapse of the Soviet Union as that there were deficits that resulted in the collapse of the Soviet Union. That is the first question. The second fold, the first fold of the first question. The second fold is I want to point out that the party has always been very sharp in characterizing and pointing out tendencies. Though some have bastardized that practice, that revolutionary practice of characterizing and reducing it to name calling. It's very important to point out a tendency, characterize it so that you can deal with it decisively. Now, in relation to the collapse of the Soviet Union, I want to point out to the National Congress of the party that was convened in 1990 in Havana, Cuba. Now, the party characterized the tendency there under the name the Havana Renegades. And I think this is the perfect opportunity for the CC to just assist me in understanding this characterization better. Now, how that characterization came about, it came about as a result of a debate that broke out in relation to whether the party members who are also leaders in the ANC should openly disclose their membership status as communist. Should they come out openly and state that they are communist, or should they conceal their communist identity? Now, that debate was divided into two. The other part was led by Chrisani and Comrade Joe Slovo, who were saying that if you're a communist, there is no need for you to conceal your identity and views. It must be known wherever you participate that you're a communist. However, there was a counter argument led by Comrade Thabo Mbeki and the other comrade. Well, I don't think it is even befitting to refer to him as a comrade now, Mr. Zuma Msholozi. The other side of the debate was led by Comrade Zuma, Baba Msholozi. And they were saying that it is not wise for communists to openly disclose their identity when they are participating in the ANC as leaders of the ANC, because they will then be attracting anti-communist attacks towards the ANC. And they were saying this because, according to their argument, the Soviet Union, which was a pillar and strength of the Communist Party and the forces of the left, anti-imperialist and colonial forces, had collapsed. And if the ANC suffers from anti-communist attacks, it will not survive that. As a result of that argument, the cabal, which was later known as the Havana Renegades, won the discussion. As a result, after that Congress in Havana, it is not all Central Committee members of the party that were published. Some were concealed. But those who were not openly known as communists, they later became leaders of the ANC, leaders in government. Some of them became presidents of the ANC, president of the country. And their conduct, while they assumed responsibilities and as leaders of the ANC, leaders in government, was to such an extent, anti-communist, and seems to abandon the anti-imperialist posture. Now, I would like the CC to just assist in decoding this further. The Havana Renegades, emanating from that Congress in Cuba, in relation to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Now, the second question is in relation to the race and class question, correctly pointed out by the keynote address that race and class are interrelated, but so is gender. So, in my view, I have noted a worrisome trend, especially within the dominant trend. It seeks to isolate the struggle for women emancipation from the class struggle. And from where I'm sitting, I believe that that tendency of isolating the struggle for women emancipation from class struggle and isolating it from capitalism presents a very perfect opportunity for sheer opportunism. And when I talk about opportunism, it's because I have noted that this particular narrative of saying that, we're not worried about the class struggle, we are only worried about the struggle for emancipating women. That is problematic in my view, because it seems like it is utilized by a group of elite women who organize themselves falsely under the guise of advancing the struggle for women emancipation, whereas they only want to create opportunities for themselves to rise into position of influence. And once they ascend to such positions, they then often utilize them to suppress other women and abandon the struggle for women emancipation. I would like to know the view of Comrade Reneva in this regard. And second, lastly, also correctly pointed out, in relation to the opening line of the Freedom Charter, that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. I fully agree. That is a revolutionary objective. However, we need to continuously protect the Freedom Charter, particularly that clause, because it is the same clause that has been utilized by narrow Pan-Africanists who were involved in the exodus of the ANC in the 1950s, who left the ANC under the guise that the Freedom Charter is a sellout document because it says that South Africa belongs to black people and settlers. And that problematic narrative has been adopted by many cadres in the mass democratic movement. And I think we have a responsibility of correcting them in saying that, comrades, you're not correct in reading that clause half and not reading it completely, because it continues to say that no government can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of the people. Now, who are the people? The majority. Who is the majority? Black people in general and African in particular. So if you read that clause in its entirety, you then realize that it is actually calling for majority rule, which is in line with the Black Republic thesis of identifying the building of a democratic Black Republic as a prerequisite or as a foundation to advance a struggle for socialism. So I think we need to emphasize on that particular clause. And in closing, Chair of the session, the narrative of a false state, of a failed state, is in line with false consciousness, and it has also been utilized by our detractors, narrow Pan-Africanists, who have said that we have not achieved anything in the last 30 years. Of course, there's been challenges, but there is progress that we have made. The South African Communist Party document, Going to the Root, published Mabuwa Komanisi published Going to the Root, which identified that we're now in the second more radical phase of the National Democratic Revolution. And it characterized what was the first phase about. And amongst those things in the first phase of the NDR was the abolishing of institutionalized white minority rule. It was about democratizing South Africa, so on and so forth. However, the second more radical phase is more concerned about getting rid of features of colonialism of a special type in the productive economy. Now, that will tell you that we have not failed, but we've encountered challenges. And amongst those challenges is reversing the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. Now, I believe we need to spend more time in combating that particular narrative. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Comrade Bonga, for those inputs. You were the last one. Before I hand over to Comrade Reneva, the book that I was trying to refer to, and I'd forgotten the name when I started, is called The Barrel of a Gun. It was written in 1970 by Ruth First. Its essence is on the coups in Africa. But Comrade Ruth, in the preface or in the introduction of the book says something along those lines, that I count myself as an African and there is no cause I hold dearer. You might think that that line simply means that when she is analyzing and being critical of the coups and the conditions that give rise to the coups, you may want to limit that quote to that perspective. But it's in the essence of that quote is on the unity and the solidarity of the African people. Because Comrade Ruth, one of the things that she was doing in that book, she demonstrates understanding that amongst the divisive tools by the imperialists and the capitalists at their disposal is the division of Africa. The artificial borders that we talk about today are as a result of the Berlin Conference, are not the making of Africans. So when we speak about South Africa as a country, we must also know that, of course, yes, it's good to feel good and talk about national feelings. But we must appreciate that those borders were not created by us as Africans, but they were created as part of the imperialist project and therefore by extension, colonialism. And at the heart of that was the exploitation of the African working class. If you think about this, the economy of South Africa is fundamentally and largely developed by the working class from SADC region, not South Africans. Historically, how this economy developed. The mines were done by laborers from Mozambique, Malawi, and so on and so forth. And at the heart of the division of Africa was to sometimes isolate Africans and sometimes pit a section of the African working class against each other. Therefore, it becomes very important for us as communists that we should at all material time be very clear on issues of justice and social justice and on the issues of solidarity, particularly across nations and ethnic groups, because it is what that is going to help us reach socialism very quickly. there's no way that you can build socialism in South Africa and isolate a country like Eswatini. It's called Eswatini today, or any other country in the SADC region, and think that you can just advance socialism in isolation of all these factors. So I just think that reading this book on how Ruth First perceived and characterized Africa, I mean, she looks at Sudan, Nigeria, Ghana, and many other countries, and how she looks at the continent from an African perspective as an African herself is very important. And I want, the book is available online as a free PDF. So I want to, as an outcome of this session, comrades must download and read the book to understand Comrade Ruth deeper. Comrade Reneva, can I hand over to you to respond to this question and also give us your closing remarks?
Yes, thank you, Comrade Chair. You eloquently also responded to the question on xenophobia. I want to beg your indulgence, please, and allow me to let Comrade Barry Gilder, who was also at that Cuban conference, respond to the whole issue of the USSR and its collapse, whether it was collapsed or whether it collapsed organically, and then also how that collapse influenced our negotiations and at what point did it affect and possibly even significantly weaken the left forces within the country. Is it okay, Comrade Mandla?
Of course, Comrade Reneva, Comrade Berry, good afternoon and more than welcome, and we are so happy to have you around us.
Thanks, Comrade Mandla. Greetings, comrades. I'm not sure if it's politically correct to be called to the podium by my wife, but I will obey her instruction. On a serious note, just to address firstly Nkosi Tetile's points about the Cuba conference. I was at the 7th Congress in Cuba. It wasn't in Havana, by the way. It was in a place called Matanzas. It was in 89, not 90. And I've never heard of this thing called the Havana Renegades. I hope not one of them. But I've never heard that term until today. So I'm not sure what it means. What is true, from what the comrade was saying, is that a number of then leaders of the party had withdrawn party, at least publicly, and some of them fully, after the unbanning, so on. And some of them have personal reasons, some of them have ideological reasons, some of them have strategic, tactical reasons. What I also need to say is, what I also need to correct is that the party was still underground at that Congress. It was before the unbanning, so the leadership of the party was not public except the chair and the GS, as far as I can recall. And even those of us delegates at that Congress, although we were allowed to vote for members of the CC and the PB, if I remember correctly, we weren't told the results except for the top, I think, top 2 or 3 positions. So yeah, I just wanted to add those facts to the story about that Congress. On the question of Soviet Union, I've always argued that it didn't collapse, it was collapsed. The collapse that happened in the last few years of the 80s and early 90s, it was a process of trying to collapse it that started from 1917. The Civil War, devastating war, the Second World War, And then, of course, the intensive propaganda campaign that went on through the so-called Cold War period. There was intense pressure on the Soviet Union, which perhaps caused the Soviet Union to react rather harshly to opposition, which made things worse for it, but maybe it was unavoidable, I don't know. But the collapsing of the Soviet Union created a situation where the West was able to, at last, put its weight behind the ending of apartheid, because they were no longer fearful that our struggle would lead to the Soviet Union having another foothold on the African continent. So that had a big impact on negotiations. I'd like to say that we didn't win our freedom, we were allowed our freedom, precisely because feared the Soviet take Africa. I don't have a question, but I think has an important. There's a continuity. There's a continuous historical line between the decades preceding the Russian Revolution itself, Civil War, right through to the Second World War, the Great Patriotic War, as the Soviets called it, the collapsing of the Soviet Union, and the rise of the West, the triumph of the West that took place, the rise of neoliberalist economics, all of which have had a profound influence on our own revolution. And what we are seeing today is some kind of shift where there's another kind of Cold War, but not on the same ideological basis. There's a kind of East-West war. And we see the influence of Western countries, the US and some of the European countries, starting to wane compared to the rise of China, Russia, and other countries. Let me stop there, Comrade Manda. Thanks.
Comrade Perry, thank you very much. I mean, I wish I could give you a little bit more time just to give us this powerful historical account, because it is precisely by understanding where that context that we'll understand how we got where we are. We really appreciate your input, and I think had I noticed that you were here, I would have definitely acknowledged you. But I will leave that to the PS. Comrade Reneva, you want to continue and give us your closing remarks also?
Yes, thank you, Comrade Manda. I just want to touch on one thing, the issue of local government and socialism. I do believe that that's what we're trying to do through the People's Red Caravan, is to demonstrate that there can be an alternative form of governance at a local level, and why it has a shortage of women. I'm not so sure that is accurate. Comrade Pam can elaborate, but not today. We also won't touch on the issue of the Cultural Revolution today. It can be a topic for another occasion. So, Comrade Mandla, I once again want to say thank you very much to the province for this opportunity. Once again, thank you very much to the province for elevating the Comrade Ruth First and other women in our liberation movement, which is so the contributions are so often undermined, despite it being equally impactful. And then to reiterate some of the elements that we can learn from the life of Comrade Ruth First, which is to commit to ensuring that the theory is tested and refined in the fires of mass struggle, to express genuine humility, to champion non-racialism and non-sexism, and to reassert revolutionary organizational discipline, and to call on everyone to find some way to influence the national dialogue and also to participate in the People's Red Caravan. Thanks, Comrade Chair.
Thank you very much, Comrade Reneva, for for those parting shots. Before I call the PS, I think the point that has been raised enough, and I want just to leave this as a thought for comrades and possibly Comrade PS. It could be one of the seminars that we must talk about. The elements of a failed state. I just want Maratua, please mute for us. I just want to leave this. Just want to leave with these elements for comrades to think about in the future without debating them. The first element of a failed state is a loss of control over territory. In other words, either due to presence of non-state actors like warlords, like militias, like terrorist groups. That's one element. The second element that I think is important to think about when we talk about a failed state is the erosion of legitimate authority that will lead to a breakdown of law and order and widespread corruption underlying that. The third one is the inability to provide essential public service, such as healthcare, education, and infrastructure. The fourth one is the prevalence of violence and human rights abuses. So that will include the extrajudicial killings, the torture, the forced displacements, and things like that. That will say that we have arrived at the failed state. And the last one that I think is important is the economic collapse that would be largely marked by elements such as high poverty, high rate of poverty, high unemployment rate, and the runaway inflations. Do we have those elements? I do not know. We all have our views. Something that we must apply our minds, and hopefully one of the days we'll talk about this as a seminar to unpack and think where are we and how we should proceed. Provincial Secretary Comrade Jacob Mamabulo, can I hand over to you to summarize for us the discussions and provide us a way forward?
Yeah, no, Comrade Chair, thank you very much. Your expectations are too high, summary and way forward. That is always the most difficult task. I've been trying to do this task for many years in the province. It has been easy. I'm not sure if I'll succeed today. But I think the very first thing to do is to thank Comrade Reneva, the great doctor, for a very well-packaged, eloquent, very consistent, very deep, thorough, and very sharp reflection, both on the current balance of forces, the contradictions in our movement, in our revolution, the world, and of course also sharing with us in a very passionate way the life of a revolutionary, the life lived by Comrade Ruth First. So I think to that extent, the comrades who have requested that the presentation be shared, our deputy chair, great leader from the Free State, where Comrade Ruth, actually in her life as a journalist of The Guardian, used to also write about the conditions of the working class in the Free State. And of course, in what was then called Transvaal. So the notes should be shared, and we commit exactly that. And I think Comrade Reneva will gladly agree to that. Let me thank Comrade Perry. We must thank him for coming on board. And of course, for his also very good contribution that he has made. Top secret, I won't disclose, Chair, that he used to be my boss, not in the conservative sense, but I've worked with him at Home Affairs. Let me disclose that. So thanks to him. And I think, Chair, one of the way forward, of the aspects that we on the on the experiences of the Soviet Union and what happened to that revolution, maybe as part of the way forward coming out of this, we should organize a session, Chair, on this platform, maybe not so long, particularly as we approach October, where we celebrate the revolutionary experiences of 1917, the Great October Socialist Revolution. Maybe we must, during that time, discuss this issue of the contradictions, the subjective and objective contradictions of that period that, of course, led to difficulties in the Soviet Union. Maybe we need that discussion. And by the way, even the August month is very important. It's just, well, we will have to bring that because it was during that period, actually, that some of the contradictions unraveled in how the Communist Party then engaged with Gorbachev on the perestroika and glasnost issue raised, and how this led to what was termed in sitting quarters as the coup attempt against Gorbachev. So I know that there could be comrades who say, look, Gorbachev, right-wing sellout, perestroika, glasnost, these were machinations bordering on collapsing the Soviet Union, and of course his relationship with the leaders of the West. But also there could be others who say, but how did the Communist Party itself manage those contradictions? Were there no better options of managing whatever the challenges that Gorbachev brought on the table? Was there no better way forward between what was represented by Gorbachev and of course then what became the then leader of Russia after the breakup, and of course the co-leadership of the Central Committee, those divisions at the top, could they have not been managed better? So Chair, the Soviet Union might have collapsed, whatever, but at least we have a reference point. Joe Slovo's pamphlet, Has Socialism Failed? As we build socialism, it's a way forward. Let me say, we're eating of socialism. We need to refer to Joe Slovo. We need to learn from the Soviet Union. We need to learn from Cuba. We need to learn from China. Actually, the Chinese Communist Party itself reflects on that period. And they will say to you, the Soviet Union collapsed. The Chinese collapsed because it avoids those mistakes. So I'm saying we'll do better. I think we must thank Comrade Perry for raising these issues in a very interesting way. Comrades, part of the way forward is that next year we must make sure that we hold this lecture in and around the time marking the death, the parcel bomb that finally killed Comrade Ruth, around 17th, 18th, but mid-August next year we must have the lecture, so that we do it precisely at the time that coincides with the brutal killing of Comrade Ruth First. I think it will be quite good. The question, comrades, is looking at the principles that Comrade Reneva has correctly outlined, articulated. How do we use the militancy, the writings, the lifelong commitment, the experiences of Comrade Ruth First to fight gender-based violence and femicide, to make sure that we can defend the working class, to mobilize, to organize exactly in the same way that she used to do even before she went into exile, even in exile. How do we make sure that we bring that to fight patriarchy, the triple oppression of women, but broadly gender-based violence and femicide? That is a fundamental question, because even crime statistics in our province indicate that actually, whilst others are going down, but gender-based violence and femicide is going high, Chair. We need to look at that. As the last point, Chair, is that for the Young Communist League and the entire student movement for SASCO that has celebrated a very important anniversary, and we must congratulate SASCO on keeping the revolutionary student movement. We must remember that Ruth First, actually, these were the founders and the comrades who participated at VETS, where, Chair, you studied as well. So the Federation of Progressive Students, where Comrade Ruth First was the Young Communist League. So we need young members of the YCL, Comrade Jan. I've seen you, our provincial secretary. We need to learn from Ruth First, that activism in campuses amongst the youth, the dynamic relationship of student life, community work, Young Communist League. Ruth First is one of the best exemplary leaders of that period, of that interface. And I think the point that was raised by yourself, Comrade Chair, about young militants of all the diverse constituents of the South African population, as you correctly articulated them, the best person to learn from is Ruth First, is Comrade Ruth First. How at an early age she was able to work and navigate that terrain. So, Chair, I think with that, let us, comrades on Facebook, on all platforms, Chair, let us also thank our head office that has made it possible for us to interact. There's a lot to say, but otherwise, comrades, as I said, this is an opportunity to recharge, to improve, to nourish, to renew our revolutionary consciousness. And Comrade Reneva has done just exactly that. We are now much more better than before we joined the lecture. We have gained knowledge, free basic education that will strengthen our revolutionary outlook, that will help us to serve the people, that will help us to work even much more harder for the actual liberation of the working class from the brutal, naked terror of capitalist exploitation, but also the legacy of colonialism of a special type that is reproducing, persisting in our country, in the triple contradictions of poverty, unemployment, and inequalities. So, Comrade Chair, the issues around the party resolutions to contest local government elections in 2026, those matters, we must respect those decisions. Democratic centralism requires that we implement and respect our resolutions, and I'm quite sure that our structures, the alliance, all of us will be seized with this matter and make sure that we finally realize what direction the party has taken, working with the alliance, within the alliance. Let us continue to respect those decisions and appeal to all comrades to be true to the decisions of the party and to remain loyal to the decisions of the party. Comrade Ruth First, at all material times, was a scholar but respected democratic centralism. And I think we should appeal to all comrades that in the richness of our debates as communists, the center should hold. There's democracy and the centralism part. The dialectic relationship of the two should always keep us going. Chair, thank you very much. Comrades, thank you. Long live the living revolutionary legacy of Comrade Ruth First. In her, in us, her militancy, her theory, her practice lives. And thanks, comrades, for paying tribute to Comrade Ruth First. On that note, the party provide lunch on digital platforms. It is there, comrades, just check. On any of your digital platforms, you can check, you'll find something, courtesy of the Communist Party in the province. Otherwise, on that note, Chair, you can now adjourn our lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nopala, for that energetic provision of the way forward. We appreciate that. I see there's quite a number of comrades who are sending their email addresses. I'm thinking of the best possible way. Comrade Kenny, are you here to share the presentation? Because comrades have left their email addresses on the chat group. Comrades, we are going to endeavor that because we do have the recording, we will capture your email addresses as soon as Comrade Reneva has emailed the presentation. We will then send the presentation to those comrades that have submitted their email addresses. That's the only announcement that I have to make. Comrades, have a good afternoon. Now the lecture has come to the end. Forward to socialism.
Forward.
Amandla.
Forward.
Forward.